thinking about how to measure how far you've come, or look at whether it's the last month, the last 6 months, the last 2 years, whatever.
Take your blinders off. Hey, what's up, troublemakers? I'm Russ.
And I'm Danny.
And this is the Memory Makers Podcast.
The show focused on helping you create amazing customer experiences and make more memories.
Memory Makers coming at you. I don't know, it's like a 1980s superhero cartoon, something or other.
Okay.
Ish.
Yeah, I didn't connect the dots right away.
Yeah, you shouldn't, because it wasn't really anything. What's up, man?
I'm living life. How are you doing?
I'm just making magic every day, baby. Making magic every day. So, having fun. Oh, I tell you, I went into a little bit of a wormhole over the weekend. So I've been looking for a new kind of artistic or creative outlet because it has been head down, bulldozing forward for a while now. And I realize I haven't been doing, some of the kind of creation or organic kind of things. Well, organic doesn't count. We've been dealing with chickens and cows and all that nonsense. But I realized I'm a little bit out of balance and need, to get back into some of this stuff. So I'm getting back into some wood carving. But thank you to the YouTubes, I found a fun new kind of approach where it's some Dremel power carving stuff, which I'm very excited about because you don't actually have to be good at it. It's a very forgiving art form, so I can mess around and just call it abstract if it doesn't look pristine. But it was really cool to get to see some of the new things that I want to try to mess around with out in the shop. So excited to jump into that.
That's cool. Abstract, artisanal, whatever word you want to put on it to be like, oh yeah, it's supposed to be like that.
Yeah, boutique, unique.
Boutique. I like that.
Any of it. What do we got going on today?
Today, I wanted to talk about a concept that's also a book called The Gap and the Gain, and it was written by Benjamin Hardy, and that was in conjunction with Dan Sullivan, who's the founder of Strategic Coach. And The Gap and the Gain is a fascinating concept. And, I recently read 10X is Easier Than 2X, which in that book, they also talk again about the gap and the gain specifically through the lens of that book. And what I want to do is break down a couple of the pieces on what that means and how to actually implement it in realistic ways in, you who are listening into your life. So essentially, what tends to happen is that you are a person and you are right here in life. And you tend to look at some ideal future of whatever that is, whether it's work, your professional career, your business, your relationships, whatever that is, and you see where you are now and where you want to go, and you see the gap between those two things. That is called the gap. On the other hand, there is the gains, which is seeing where you are now and looking at where you started and all the gains that you've made over time. And those are the two different philosophies between the gap and the gain. And so what I'd like to kind of walk through and break down a little bit with you on this podcast are some of the reasons why so many people get stuck in gap thinking, where that's some ideal version of the future and these big goals that they want to achieve, and some of the downsides to viewing all of life through that lens. So part of the reason why gap thinking doesn't work is that our ideals, whether that is in your business, your relationships, or anything else, will never actually achieve them. It's like chasing the horizon. We won't ever actually get there because the more that we grow and the more progress that we make, those ideals change and move. So the goalposts keep moving. It's just like if I'm going to, head east and I'm going to meet the horizon, no matter how far I walk, I'll never actually get there. Right? No matter how far you travel, you'll never actually reach those ideals. They are very useful in order to have direction of, I have this ideal, I have this goal, I'm going to move in that direction. And that helps us set those milestones along the way and move our business in that right direction. But the problem is we're never actually going to get there. And so, there's a couple examples he talked about in the book, or a lot of entrepreneurs will have this ideal future, some big goal that they want to achieve, and they make progress, but they're not there yet. And then they end up becoming more miserable because they haven't reached some ideal future state. which I find fascinating because they literally talks in the book about how they made progress and they're more miserable than they were before they made the progress. And I find that so fascinating. And, it's also the classic example of what I think happens a lot with whether you're an entrepreneur or a leader in any capacity is the but. You make progress toward a goal and you achieve some amount of progress, or you get to some percentage of that goal, or maybe you even reach that goal and it's people want to celebrate, but then you have that voice in the back of your head or the voice you say out loud. Yeah, but we didn't get why. Well, we were able to achieve all of these results. Yeah, but we didn't do that. Well, we're able to make this much revenue. Yeah, but we didn't make that much. And the problem is that when we get stuck in that thinking, it becomes demoralizing over time of all we see is this ideal version of the future, and we see where we are and that gap between us, and it's just this chasm that we feel we can never actually cross, because we're never going to actually cross it. The way to do it is to measure backwards. He's got the phrase AMB, always measure backwards. Always be measuring between where you are and where you used to be. And that shows your true version of progress. And so that's kind of a little bit of the groundwork that I wanted to lay before I throw it off to you for the next point, Russ.
Yeah, I totally loved this book, and it resonated in a lot of ways, just because, again, the high achiever dissatisfaction, right? Just because we are constantly elevating game, and so then what was good for yesterday is not the same as what's good for tomorrow. And there are aspects of that that are healthy. We need to have a really clear, vivid vision of where we want to go. But you still have to recognize, as you're setting new goals and new objectives and all of that, that if we're only focused on what's next as opposed to that progress, there are a lot of wins that we don't count. And so instead of being motivated by your goals of, we did this, oh great, now next year we're going to have to do this much in revenue, right? We booked all of these parties, or, insert number here for your size and scope of your business. Like, we booked all of this corporate business last year, and that was great, and we hit our goals. And so then, let's have 25% more growth in that. And, we only hit 20% growth. Well, it's like, that's still a substantial moving of the needle. And so it's really easy to lose track of the significant gains that you can have when it comes to that. And some folks, and I do this as well, as I don't, humble brag as a self-designated high achiever, is I will look at things and say, that gap is what fuels me of like, if I don't hit a goal, like that just fuels me to be that much more, dedicated and driven and push to get to achieve the next one and overcompensate for that whole piece. But this is, a really slippery slope that if you're not careful or self-aware about it, it can be a toxic fuel for you, or it's like burning the candle at both ends, because you have, you're having more friction around what should be something that is inspiring you and pushing you to try new things and do all of that. But it can get to a place where you're just disenfranchised by the fact that the goal exists. It's like, you're not measuring the snowball effect that you've had to get to that point. You're just dissatisfied with the fact that it's not there yet. And so that chasing of the future instead of appreciating the present is something that can really be dangerous and really have a negative impact and be counterintuitive to what we're actually trying to achieve. And so I'm a big continual believer in trying to stay focused on, yes, we need to have a vision for the future, but here's where we are now, and here's what's going well about that, and here's, what's not on track, but being able to focus of, this set of problems is certainly better than the old set of problems that we had, right? Because there are always going to be those problems. And so by being present in the moment, as opposed to just dissatisfied with, we don't have this new thing, this new arbitrary goal that we've set for ourselves, of what was it, in the past? How did this look like in the past? Were we even in a position to be able to do anything remotely near this? And especially when businesses and people go through expanded rapid growth, there can be this kind of hangover period of, not remembering the fact that this is going to peak and valley, and it's not going to just be this straight, kind of, or depending on which way it goes, I don't know which one, but the up and to the right, like it's not a straight line, right? There's going to be ebbs and flows. There's going to be seasons of all of that. And so that's what really struck me the most out of this, was to be present in the fact that it's not just a straight line. It's going to, an unalome in the Buddhist standpoint of, you're going to zig and zag to eventually go to that straight ahead point, and that's okay. and because there are going to be valuable lessons that we also learn from that, or it's going to force us to try to take on new challenges or approaches and things because it doesn't inherently work, because we can't foresee everything that's going to be bumping in our way on that path. Like, it's a journey, not a ski lift. You know what I'm saying?
I know what you're saying. Yeah. And there's a quote that really jumps out to me as you were talking through the whole idea of you're chasing this future, but you're not living in the moment, and that kind of friction that can exist. This is a quote from Alex Hormozy that I love, because it's a great reminder of that. You've already accomplished goals you said would make you happy. You've already accomplished goals you said would make you happy. Because when we accomplish that goal and we cross that finish line, meet that milestone, whatever metaphor you want to use, those goalposts immediately get moved, because it feels good for a day, a week, 5 minutes. Let's be real. It doesn't feel great for that long, because that just becomes our new normal. And then we keep chasing. And if we only feel like we're going to be fulfilled and happy when some distant future make-believe time, we'll never actually be fulfilled and happy, and all those different things. And, you know, one of the interesting things about this is that thinking in the gains actually helps create confidence, right? So when you're measuring backwards, it actually helps you measure, because, you know, using that same metaphor of the horizon, the only way to measure the distance you've traveled is by measuring from where you are back to where you started, not where you are to the horizon. You can't measure progress that way. It's impossible. We have to measure backwards. It's the only way. And when we do measure backward, we get clarity on exactly how far we have come. And this is invigorating, and it is exciting, and it builds confidence, and it builds gratitude. And we also start to see, you know, to your point earlier, there's a lot of wins and gains that people just don't count when they're looking toward the future. But when you look backwards and you start really appreciating that, you start finding a lot of gains and wins that you normally wouldn't consider progress in your life. And you also find that every experience that you have when you look backwards, whether it was positive or whether, you know, it was a success, or whether you failed at something or you made a mistake or you fell short, every single experience that you have from the past, when you look at it from the gains perspective, is something that you learn from. Every experience, good and bad, is a learning experience. And then you get to define for you what those experiences mean. Because when you have a long enough time horizon looking backwards, every failure or unfortunate thing or thing that happens in your life, something good always comes of it, every single time. And that is a helpful way for us to perceive our past and be able to realize that every experience that we're going through, we're going to come out better for it, and we're going to learn from it, and we're going to grow from it. And when you're in the gains, everything's happening for you, not to you, because every experience has something to teach you.
Yeah. We were on a work call earlier today, and we were chatting, and I was like, man, I am tired. But it's because I've been doing really a lot of things and making good progress and being productive. Like, it's still flipping the script and the meaning that we attach to so much of this stuff, and that framework where, okay, well, I'm not where I want to be. But at the flip side of that script is, where were you? And isn't that, and hopefully further. And if it's not further, then we really need to start evaluating what the tactics and approaches and things are. But it's because we are used to making constant progress, you just have to zoom back out and get that bird's eye view of what the topography is. And that's so much of what that measuring backwards really paints a picture for me, at least. And some helpful questions that we've started using on a more regular basis, especially when we find ourselves kind of getting into this mode, is, you know, looking back over longer and shorter periods of time to make sure that we are reminding ourselves, like, I am capable of achieving hard things. I have a track record of being very successful at these things and taking it on, whether it's directly pursuant to what I'm, you know, this specific goal is, or just my growth as an individual. And so some great questions that are good, and a really helpful tactic as you look back at these questions is not just kind of waiting for the first things that pop into your head, although that's a good first, step, is also, going back through your photos and your pictures and your calendars of, like, what were these things, like, so how have I grown as a person over the last 3 years? What are the biggest things that I've learned over the last 12 months? what meaningful experiences have I had in the last 90 days? Going back through and looking over those time periods for concrete things, whether it's journal entries or Instagram or Facebook posts, all of that kind of stuff, because there's so much more. It's an iceberg, right? Like there's so much more underneath the surface that is just because your brain is filing that into the deep, dark nether regions of the archives of, and that may be slightly inappropriate, but the recesses of your brain, it's going to file that stuff back. And so you need to keep asking yourselves these types of questions of what important progress have you made in the last 7 days? How is your life different or better now than it was 30 days ago? And going through those different measurements of time to remind yourself and show yourself that you have a body of work that says, I take on challenges and I have a good track record of achieving them. And for those that I haven't achieved, I still have lessons that have made it possible for these other things to be done as well. And so the final question that I really like, that Danny, you dropped this into my brain, and it was that's a nice little gift for myself to give me a little bit of grace, was what went well today because of me, right? Like you can be heads down doing things, just kind of lost in the muck of things. But something went well today because you had a hand in it. And so just, giving yourself and training your brain to find those things so that way you can have a little bit of a better Pavlovian response to these things. And it makes a big difference in my mind and my experience.
And, when we think about this gap and gain thinking, it's not just for you, the listener, as the owner of the business or as a manager or leader within the business. It's also for your team. Because I remember I was having a conversation with somebody a few months back, and we're talking about celebrating wins and trying to get into this gains mindset. And he was kind of struggling with it. And there was a line that he said that stuck out to me. He's like, well, with all the problems I'm having over here, I just don't think we deserve to be celebrating anything at the moment. And what I pointed out was that, yes, you have areas that you want to grow, but what you're saying is that my team's not allowed to celebrate, and I'm not allowed to celebrate them until we're perfect. And that's a recipe for disaster and a decreased morale. And it's remembering that this is not just some like touchy-feely, like, oh, well, we went for a goal and we didn't achieve it, but look, we learned some stuff. Yeah. It's really practical because yes, you can use as much as you want that this whole, I'm going to chase the future and I have this ideal state, I'm going to push, I'm going to grind, I'm going to hustle. You're going to do all those things. But if you only ever look at the horizon, you're missing today every single day. Because today is where life is. Today is where life happens. Today is where we are fulfilled and we're happy and we get to make an impact on people. You get guests that come into your center and you get a smile on their face. That's not happening a year from the future. That's happening today. Right now in this moment. And if we don't remember that, if we don't measure backwards at how far we've actually come, and not just with our external achievements, but internally as who we are as people, who we are as leaders, if we don't measure backwards, then we're going to just forever chase some future and never ever get fulfilled by it. And so for me, this is something that I am very passionate about because it's important that I want people to live a more fulfilled, happier, joyful, and impactful life every single day. And that happens every single day in the now, not 6 months, a year, for 10 years from now. So that's where I'm going to get off my soapbox and wrap it up.
If your mic wasn't on a stand, you could drop it, friend. No, that's awesome. That's fantastic. I think that puts us at a really good kind of spot to wrap things up with this. And so, we've got a ton more awesome content coming your guys' way as usual with the weekly episodes, more operator interviews, more guest appearances, things like that, taking some of the great feedback and books that you guys want us to dive deeper into, topics that you want us to make sure that we're covering. So come back again to hear more of these valuable insights from us and others as we start making more happen.
If you like what you heard, don't forget to subscribe and leave a review.
And we always appreciate that 5 stars. Please and thank you.
If you've got ideas for future episodes, people you'd like to see on this or topics, follow us on social media and send us a DM.
Big shout out and a thank you to Mikey Mike for working the Ultranet. And thank you for joining us. And we will catch you on the next one. I'm down to clown. A really great method and tool set. Come on. How does this one go again? Yep. 3.5 take Russ. That's what they call me.
What was the half take then?
I don't know. It's up here.
I don't know.
Not everything that comes out of here makes sense. You know what I'm saying? It's just straight Thunderdome. Positive energy.
All right.
Go flight. Go flight.
I'm ready whenever you guys are.